Hebrew, I have a Israelis in my community. So he tells me, I'm ready to come. I'm ready to come. The truth is, it was known in Shamil, he used to have a Tanya Shir for years for Israelis. So he used to come once a week. So I said, Aייzенבך, בכל הכבוד, you want to come? Sure. So, she knows, we invited them to Rebbetzin, they spent Shabbos with us. And then the main shir, what the Chaim was in the afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, by the Suda there. And then he gets up, and he starts explaining the pasuk in Tehillim, Mi ha'i shechafetz chayim. And he started to explain, going on and on. At Bersidus, at Binigle, whatever we want. And people were looking like that. He never mentioned the Chafetz Chaim. And everybody was sure that he's talking about the Chafetz Chaim. And Baruch Hashem, Yatzalu b'Shalom, as we say. And it was really a very pleasant Shabbos, very pleasant together. And then we had a lot of connection, we spoke a lot. Just want, since we are talking here about not Stam, but the true Talmid Chacham, true Chassidus, Nigle, Tanakh, he knew Tanakh, was back in Tanakh. So I'd like to bring a pasuk in Shir Hashem, it's Pekhet, pasuk Yud, that says, Ani choma v'shadai kamigdalot. The Gemara in Pesachim, Pezayin, says, Ani choma zu Torah, v'shadai kamigdalot, elu talmidei chachamim. So the Ani choma, what's a choma? It's walls. So that's the Torah. Torah is walls for us. V'shadai kamigdalot, towers. Who's Adu talmidei chachamim? אלו תלמידי חכמים. רש"י explains that, שמגינים על הדור. תלמיד חכמים, they save the generation. We have to understand exactly what the Gemara wants to teach us here. What's a choma, what's a Torah choma, what's a migdal, what's a talmid chacham, that's a migdal. So we understand very clear that when we build a city, and want to make it very safe, so we have to build a choma around the city. The walls all around the city. But those walls are not enough, because we can't predict if the oyev comes. We don't see them. We can't predict. To make sure that we are safe, so we need migdal. What's a migdal? It's a tower. Why a tower? Because you could see from far. If the oyev is coming, you could see it from far, and then you could prepare yourself. But if there is no tower, we can't know when the oyev is coming. So that's why the Gemara says, Ani choma zu Torah. No question about it that the Torah is our magen, our protection, the main protection that we have. But that Torah is very good when we add also the Talmidei Chachamim, we add the Migdal. So that's why, as the Gemara says, Chazaka lemed shenishkach min halev leachar yam chodesh. That means we are sure that we forget our met. Someone passed away, father, mother, whoever, after Yud Bet Chodesh, after 12 months, nishkach min halev, we forget, comes out of our heart. So what does it mean? We never forget. Once someone asked me, my father passed away 50 years ago. Do I still have to say Kaddish? Do I still have to do the Yahrzeit for him? 50 years ago. I said, for sure, it's your father. Kozma that you are alive, you have a mitzvah of akarat tov, mitzvah kibud ve'em. But the main thing here, it's what means met nishkach min halev. What does it mean that we forget the met min halev? So the way to explain it is, the first year of Avedus is very hard. It's very hard. We are connected to all kinds of halachos, hilchos Avedut, that we have to make sure what to do, what not to do, restrictions, to say Kaddishim, to make sure that we have minyanim. It's hard. And we feel that the whole thing is to be connected to the neshama and to be connected to the mess that still needs us. Needs the Kaddishim, needs the mitzvahs, needs everything. But after Yom Chodesh, there is no more Kaddishim. There is no more restrictions. So we go back to normal life. So the Met Nishkach, the statues of a Met, is not here anymore. And now we bring back the person who passed away, the father or whoever he is, and we bring back him alive. What does it mean to bring back him alive? We have to remember who he was, what he was doing, what in the situation I would speak to my father and to ask him, he's not here, what he would tell to me, what he would say to me. So that's the inyan of Met Nishkach. That's why, for sure, we understand that the Talmidei Chachamim, they are the towers. Meginim, shemeginim al ador. They protect us. For sure, we have a Rebbe. That's above everything. But beside the Rebbe, we have Mashpim, we have Rashi Yeshivas, we have Rabbanim, we have Shluchim all over the world. That do that, they are the Migdal Or, they are the towers, they are the true Migdal, to protect the whole world. But the question is to be connected and to appoint to ourselves. And when we remember Rabbi Aייzenbech as a tziyur, a true Talmid Chacham, a true Mashpia, a true Chassid, wherever, even as it was mentioned here, even walking on the street, was just seeing him walking on the street, you see what means a Chassid. He really was a true tziyur. So what we have to learn from this, that the same way that he makes sure to be a mashpia, to have talmidim. My son was one of his talmidim, and he told me, Rabbi Aייzenbech made sure that everybody understood, and if we didn't understood, he took it to the heart. He took it personally, he took it very, very, very hard on him. Why? Because he had that ahava, that love for his talmidim, for the keilah, for everybody, as he was said before. So, what we have to learn from that? By Chabad, we don't do hesped. But what do we need in hesped? The hesped is for yekara de shechve, yekara de chai. That means we have to honor the person who left physically, and it's for us also. V'achai teneribo. That means we have to learn when somebody like this leaves this world. How could we replace him? Maybe one person cannot replace him. Maybe we need a few people to replace him. And that's what we have to learn of his ways, his teaching, his chassidus, his love for everybody. So for sure, we take that upon us. And the main thing is to appoint on ourselves, Rabbanim, Aserech Harav, Mashpim. We need a Mashpia, we need a Lord, that's the way it has to be. If we do that, for sure, we deserve to Biat Mashiach Tzidkenu. And as we say, that
thank you very much, Rabbi Manon. It's my distinct honor to call upon one of my greatest times in my life is when Rabbi Kaplan came to Montreal, and I was one of the first classes to have Rabbi Kaplan as my Rosh Yeshiva, as Mashpia, and as Rabbi Manon just shared with us the V'achai and Libe. I just want to share that my father, in his entire life, that I was blessed to be with him, I never saw him waste a minute. My father never was the guy sitting on the couch schmoozing. My father was always with a sefer, always learning, always davening, always doing. He never wasted a minute in his life. Another concept Rabbi Manon mentioned is about the concept of chassidus. I think my father's beautiful thing, yes, he used to chazan my morim here, and he did every likut, every maimer, everything that came out from the Rebbe. He didn't go to sleep before he learned it in its entirety. But the nice part was, at the same time he was hazarding a deep mind here in yeshiva, that night he would be sitting with a Pasha Ta'id, a Balshemsky, learning Chassidus, because that concept of Iskashis, of Abbas Yisro, really came out in the most beautiful way. And the young lady just mentioned to me how he used to come for 8 years, he used to go once a week to learn Tanya with beautiful Neshamas, who today are proud to have beautiful Mishpachos themselves. So without further ado, the Honorable Rosh Yeshiva Rabbi Kaplan.
Melech says, Eis ledaber, Eis lachshas v'ledaber. Then he says, Eis spoit. It doesn't say Eis nispoit, Eis spoit. Eis spoit means that you don't have to say anything. You know, just you mention the name, just you say the name, you know already everything. I think talking about Eisenbach, Koisli Beis HaMedrash, the walls from this room can be witness. The way Davos over here, every Shabbat Bariches, the Shur Mechsides. I had a chance to sit near Eisenbach, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and I saw what's made Davna. And I'm thinking, what's going to be this year? Who I'm going to look? Maybe I have to look at there's a stoshim to the Rebbe's Eisenbach. Weißt du, wir haben einen guten Deal. Rosh Hashanah, we have Tfilas Chaneh, it's something. Who get me gucken? Weißt du, I'm still thinking. But the Mamish I say was to see the way down with Adveikus, the Shemoneh Esrei, Yom Kippur. It's something. We're going to miss it. Meir Rabbi said, I mentioned before, I know that Rabbi Eisenbach, I know that Rabbi Eisenbach, every year this time, Parshas Nitzovim, he had a question. I don't know if you know that Rabbi Eisenbach was Boki B'Likutei Torah Baal Peh. The Rebbe made a takone, I think he started Tov Shirofei, that every week, you heard, listen, every week, men, not just women, every week you have to learn the Likutei Torah. You have to Mavesed Chumash, you have to be Mavesed the Chassidische Parsha. He was Medaik in it. He's a Chosid for Rebbe. The Rebbe said, so every week for 50 years, he was learning the Torah, he was giving shurim. I know the last couple of years, when he couldn't see so well, he used to give a shir to the Torah, he didn't look even, Baal Peh. Rabbi Eisbach know the Sefer to the Torah Baal Peh. So I want to tell you, 6-7 years ago, there was one of the bochum from the yeshiva that he has the whole Mesichte Baba Basra Baal Peh with tasteless. So I decided, we're going to take him to the Rav Roshi. He should see bochum from Ibrit Mimi. Went to his house, I was there to test him, so Mama, she was mispilus. After I told him the whole Mesichte Baal Peh, he saw the way. He said, I have to aufstehen for you, I have to stand up for you. Stand up. Rabbi said, I think we have to stand up for Rabbi Eisbach. Yes, it's too late now. If you want to stand up now, it's on the rate. But Ayid was scared ganz to the Torah. I know he told somebody that he knows 1,000 Ma'amorim Baal Peh. Rabbi Eisbach was Isha Emes. He would never lie, say the Emes. That's it, Pasha. And not only he knew so many Ma'amorim Baal Peh, in the Likutei Torah Baal Peh, I want to tell you a story of the Baal Shem Tov, the famous story that one of the Litvische came to the Baal Shem Tov. He was a big Goen. He wanted to see who the Baal Shem Tov is, what Chassidus. As a Goen, he came to the Baal Shem Tov, he thought the Baal Shem Tov was going to read with him and learn, and Baal Shem Tov told him, go in the backyard, the front, and speak with somebody of my Talmidim. He was busy with the horses, he read with them. He felt very bad, Baal Shem Tov sent him away. So he went to this guy, he told him, Baal Shem Tov sent me, I should speak with him in learning. So he said, speak with me, I don't know anything. So he said, yeah, I have a little question. What's the question? The Gemara says in Brochus, what's the deal? We have 9 people. Tisha v'or. You want to have a minyan, you need 10 people. Right? 10 men, not women. I don't know why, but that's a halacha. You need 10 men to have a minyan. What's the deal if you have 9 men and you have a own Kaddish? A book is mitzvah. Can you mitzaref? The question is Gemara. You'll believe it, you can look, you'll see it, Daf Nundal. So the Gemara answers, Gavre Boino, we need a form a mensch. So he tells them, what's the pshat in the Gemara over here? So explain it. The pshat is, I say, you can be somebody who knows a lot of Gemaras, can't stay about peh, or but the Gemara, nothing to do with you, it's like a book is mitzvah. A book is mitzvah, the book is the book, it's a blind book, it's the sform, but it's not just happened, you put the sform over there, but there's no shaykhs. It's not a psa connection. Gavra Boino, what is that Gavra Boino? We need that in learning should have a ashpa on the person who's learning. So duchtamen, Gavra Boino. So then we snag in the head that they got a message over here. That's not enough learning. Like a word, was gelernt Tere, was Tere, Tiro is gelernt. What did Tere teach you? So when I look at Eizebach, not his bogi with the Tere. Do kunnen with the Tere, gelernt with the Tere, with the Tere. His question was, the Alter Rebbe says, Atem Yitzovim Hayim Kulchem, Seichem Madin, or Sheichem Shiftechem. The Alter Rebbe says, V'choshiv 10 darges. It's 10 darges, that's the Loshim of the Alter Rebbe. So Rabbi Eizebach says, take a Chumash Kant, you see it's only 9. Yeah? Spiegelman, you can take a Chumash. You'll take, it's only 9. It's not 10. So he says, Kol Ish Yisrael, that's another Dagya. Kol Ish Yisrael. Just, Kol is not a lamb, Ish Yisrael. Ish Yisrael, that's Eichah. You have to speak about it. Or to say something else. You know what to say, not being aspect. The embassy is that I know Rav Eizebach before everybody over here. I know Rav Eizebach 65 years ago, when I was a kid in the Yeshiva Palace, Rav Eizebach taught us. Taught us in Palace in Lud 65 years ago, the kids. Taught us, I still remember what he taught us. He learned us Bifas Anenim, Pasabo Bekistin. He explained it so well, I remember till today, whatever he teaches, like a baby scientist, who said that was a mamash achush miyuchet. Achush miyuchet. You know, it says, Benegei Avrom Avinu, it says, Vayovi Avrom Avinu, lisped lesoro venifkoiso. Give a hesped and to cry. Everybody asks a question, the hesped comes later. First is crying, and then you give a hesped. What's the least bit of nifkoiso? Is that the difference between family members? Family members, the first crying, and then you can talk to them. The beginning is not just stam people. Least bit of nifkoiso. You have to hear about them first, then you start to cry. You explain who is Rav Eizebach, the ganze Ariches. I know I'm not going to make you cry, I don't want to make you cry. The Alter Rebbe says that he shelu, mare ponim sedes l'kulam, but I want to take out in the kude and say about Rabbi Eizebach. What was the hesped that Avram Avinu gave his lady in Sodom? It says, he said one thing, Shnei Chai Yisoro, that's the ganze hesped. What's the Shnei Chai Yisoro? Rashi says, Kulam shovu l'teva. When he was young, when he was old, Rabbi Eizebach, since he was a bocher, and since later on, he had the highest Ichsides. When he was a bocher, it's gekocht, close to the Ichsidische, it was close to Arav Chaim Kesselman, that today the Imeled is Chof Elul. Now he told me once, he wanted to go for Shabbos, he thought Rav Chaim Chonish was so on, I don't know. And whatever, Shulchan said, yeah, come to me, I'll give you. After he never told me that. The Bizot, they went on, but it was close to Rav Shulchan, it was close to Rav Shulchan, to Rav Sheil Grub, to Rav Sheil Bersislin, to all the basic Siddish Rav Lando. he had always the canoes, you know, the Eisbachs. He would have very canoes and Rebbe Skovet. The Rebbe Skovet for them was Adei Sof. They were ready to go Mesiras Nefesh for Rebbe Skovet. There's a lot of stories about it. I'll tell you one little story that happened many years ago. I was there by Levaya in Yisrael in Yerushalayim for the Rosh Yeshiva from Teras Emes. You know, the Rebbe wanted that Rabbi Tzol Zoldi should be the Rabbi Roshi from Yerushalayim. The ganze Shakla B'Tayim, that the Rebbe wanted. So I remember in Levaya there was a Rabbi Eizber was going around and make sure that a person is going to invite him to speak, he should say clearly the Rabbi Roshi from Yerushalayim. The Rebbe Muzok, the Rebbe Muzok. So it was a canoe von Rebbe's Inyonim, von Rebbe's Kovet, mit der Mamesh, Amerike Tkifes, Amerike Starkheit. And there was always, all these years, he was a bocher till always the Rebbe's Inyonim was negated. And the same thing, the Chayser Sidis, Kulam Shogim Latebo. When he was a bocher, it was a Chayser Sidis, a Chayser learning, in the Koch, the American Koch. The same thing later on, Adel Shogim Latebo. And this is the lesson that we can learn, that the Chavush learn, V'achai Yitin Lalibe, to learn Arois from Achosim, wo der Rebbe's Eroes, was gewinnt beim Seherteil, sie leben mit Lekute Teire, sie alle Unionen, der Rebbe's Mitzvah, that is some mentioned before, alle Unionen, there's a lot to talk. If you want to hear later on, we can give you privately, it's nicht rein Bariches. A Kol Ponim, Ebschen soll helfen, soll sein, like the Alter Rebbe says, Ate Nitzogam Ayei, Nitzovim, Vezeichim Badin, Yishalol Zeiche, to Aksir, Vachsim Eteve, V'kitzu, V'ranu, Shech Neofo, V'u B'seicho, V'kol Mamish.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kaplan. I couldn't agree more that my mother's davening is quite up there. I just want to mention that my, my father's Taka Chosid as a bocher. When he came back to Montreal and he got married, it took a very special Ishis Chayil, like my dear mother, who every single Shabbos, I don't recall till I went off to yeshiva, that my father ever came home after davening. He always davened bariches, then he went to Fabrein, and at times he came home after Fabrein a little colorful. But my mother was always there, welcoming him, supporting him. So I'm sure he's showering down huge brachas that my mother should be gesund and stark, and to continue to give her the koyach to do all the good that she does. I'd like to ask Rabbi Nu, the Hoib Shliach from MTC, to please honor us with a few words in honor of my father.
We owe Reb Shalom Leyb a great debt of thanks. And it goes back to make Bereshis. Is Brody here? Yeah. So it reminded me of some of the details. I asked him in the early years, this is 1984, 83, 45, if he would give a shir to the women, Tanya, Israelis who speak Ivrit, speak Hebrew. And he immediately agreed. 8 years, friends, he gave the shir, never missed. Never missed a shir. So much so, you were just telling me that there was a family simcha, a birthday party. He was at the shir, on time, but his devotion, whether simchas, yontev, he was there. 8 years. That shir spawned another shir. For the husbands, after a while, the husband says, Loma Nigora. So there we asked Chaim Shlomo Cohen to give the shir to the men, which he did, and that, by the way, formed the nucleus. Chaim Shlomo is here. No. Of his own mother, which started in Shalmadi and then really continued in MTC for a long time, if you know the history. And Baruch Hashem. So Reb Shalom Leyb was a huge part of this. Just want to add on a personal level. Before the days of Art Scroll, the Shaila I said this still today, I'll call it Bit Shemeya. But Nigel and Gemara, I would call Reb Shalom Leyb. Svara, Gemara, Taisus, whatever it was, that I needed to know. I also, like all of you, I don't know if I was different, didn't live in the community, but I always felt very strongly his warmth. He was Pasha Makar and he would sincerely inquire how things were going. I was zeicher to be several times by his house, one memorable one with the bottle Kaslina, which I will never forget, and very thankful Pasha for his friendship. I'll just conclude by saying, you heard, I was just hearing Rabbi Kaplan saying, it's Yekoch, Rebbe Sinyonim, Rebbe's covered the Babich. Remember, he was tired and he gave a nefesh. But you always say that truth, emes, comes in paradox. It has to. Because truth is rooted in the Almighty. The Almighty is the source of opposites. He was, on the one hand, very warm and engaging person. This is my experience. On the other hand, I want to tell you, aristocratisch. He had an elegance about him. He had a certain snarsus, down to Rosh Hashanah, the two tchunas of Malchus, snapshus and snarsus. He embodied that. Tot Eberster helfen, soll sein, wie Kitzer an und Sheikh Liofer, der Rebbe bereushen, bereishenu, wo besuchen, and jemand wird sein, der Rebbe ist gut gebencht, dieses Jahr, nach einzig Jahr, nach Pfarr Rosh Hashanah. And I thank Mrs. Eisen for the opportunity to just in some small way express our gratitude and thanks and appreciation for the years, really the years of devotion with his heart and soul to what was required, especially for us in those early days of Shalom. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to wish you a Shalom Shalom Matevas, Chassidische Nachas of all of your children, Eniklach, Hura Eniklach, and we mentioned alle zusammen mit Mashiach and jemand hat sein gut, afepik.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Nu. It reminds me that someone once asked Rabbi Nu, someone once asked him, Chaim Berisker, how you talking that he's close to Lubavitch? So he said, when the Eibishter chose to build the Beis HaMikdash, why did you go to Har Sinai? He already built the Beis HaMikdash there. Why did you go to Har Sinai? And we're taught that the reason is because he said that the Eibishter was looking for Mesidus Nefesh. So he says, yes, Har Sinai has Teda, but Har HaBayis has Mesidus Nefesh. So the Brisker said, we have Teda. In Lubavitch, there's Mesidus Nefesh. In Lubavitch, we say we have Teda and Mesidus Nefesh. I feel bad, Rabbi Du never asked my father Chassidus too. Anyways, we're honored to have Rabbi Dahan with us today. Hakal Helach Acha Chitum. My father spent many years here in yeshiva, but Vayechi Yaakov, the ultimate time he had, the ultimate covet, the ultimate deserved covet, and the ultimate treatment he had was in the seminary. So a very special Hakadosh Hatev to Rabbi Dahan and his staff for giving my father the ultimate time until his passing.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. Aייzenbach's presence in the seminary was in itself what, just for him being there, was already teaching the girls whatever they needed to learn. Everything else that he taught them was kula revach. But before I start, I just want to say that I have to be very careful with what I say, because there was once a levaya of one of our common distant relatives. Rabbi Aייzenbach was a friend, Mashpia, but was also a relative. And once by a levaya, there was a hesped. And a distant relative from Toronto made a hesped describing the virtue of his mother, of how well she needed covers for tissue boxes and so on. And after the levaya, Rabbi Aייzenbach tells me, now you see why you don't make a spade. So I have to be careful with the story that I said, but so far so good. There was as I mentioned, as Mashpia and a friend, he once walked into the office in seminary and he saw, after his class, between his classes, he always came to sit. For me, was the light of the week, the day Rabbi Aייzenbach came, the days Rabbi Aייzenbach came to teach. I know in between the classes, by recess, I'm going to have a 10-minute verbrengen. This was going on. So one day he comes in and he sees me, Mom is very tired. He says, what's happening? I said, I can't sleep at night. I wake up 3 in the morning, I try to fall back asleep, I can't. So he tells me a very simple answer. Next time this happens to you, you get up, wash the Wasser, open up a Gemara, start learning, you'll see, you'll fall asleep. Okay. Next day he comes and he sees me in the office. He says, I'm still tired. He says, did you listen to my answer? I said, yes, I did. So what did you do? Tell me what you did. I said, I'll tell you the truth. I woke up around 3 o'clock. I thought getting up to get the Gemara, I was lazy. So I washed the Wasser and I chazer the Maimer that I had learned from beginning to the end. And Mamish, you know the details. I wanted to get tired. I chazered one time. I said, I told you Gemara, why did you go learn the Maimer? Maimer's going to keep you up. Anyways, that's in addition to all of his Chassidishkeit, he was also a man with a good personality, sense of humor. I've just add one more. I can't help it. But one time after Maimer downstairs, I was a little frustrated. I heard the Chazan with his, pronunciation, and I said, Rabbi Eisen-Bach, we have to tell to Achenu Ashkenazim that the Eibishter is a friend, he's not an oyev, he's not an enemy. So what he said, the guy said, oyev Amo Yisrael. He said, oyev Amo Yisrael. With that missing gebit, he tells me, we have to tell to Achenu Asfaradim, HaKadosh Baruch is not a bocher. I said, what do you mean a bocher? He said, a bocher Amo Yisrael. This was But on a more serious note, I once told him that I just learned the Sikha, in which the Rebbe say, out of nowhere, in the middle of a Sikha, the Rebbe says, Shabbos Pinches Tovshim Dalet. The Rebbe says, and here's it saying, Atomim Mitale Mayus. And he's worried. Why is he worried on Shabbos? Because a doctor told him that maybe he'll need a surgery. And it bothers him on Shabbos to the point that it is noticeable on him. Why do you have to worry about what's going to be? Soon we're going to say, Tzidkot Tzedek, it's going to be Inyan of Midas HaRachamim. And then everything is going to be fine, and who knows, maybe after Shabbos you won't even need that surgery. And then the Rebbe went to talk about Golus, about Haynu Kichoyimim, nothing to do with it. And I told him that Eizebach was very interesting. In the middle of a Sikha, the Rebbe just threw this in, out of nowhere. He tells me, I was sitting there. I was sitting by the Fabrengen. I was worried about some health issue, and possibly a surgery or whatever. And they ever mentioned it, they ever saw it on my face. And they ever mentioned by Fabrengen, and I don't remember the end of the story. Maybe family members, if they know the story, could clarify if there was indeed of a surgery afterwards or not, or if the whole thing was bottled. But a person that they ever called Atomim Mitale Mayus. Talking about the Yaartzeit, by a Matzeva, somebody once asked if we should mention among the Mayus that there was a Tomim, and the Rebbe says, Tomim is the biggest mind. And here comes the Rebbe and says, Atomim Mitale Mayus. About Rabbi Eisen. I don't think we need more of a hesped than this. Just want to finish with one Torah, because he often spoke about his mashpiyim, and sometimes he spoke about the mashpiyah as a colleague. When he spoke about Sheir, he said a mashpiyah, but was working for him as well as a colleague. So I felt that I had that relationship. He was a mashpiyah and a colleague, but I also wanted to flaunt my mashpiyim too, so I would talk to him and listen. So one day he told me, I want to share with you Avot Chassidus, Avertel. Once a Nissen was here in Mונטריאול and Fabrengen, he said, Poideinu matzirenu me'olam u'shmecha. And the pshat of it is, Poideinu u'matzirenu me'olam. What could save us from anachas ha'olam and from all the interests in ha'olam? Hu shemecha is learn Chassidus. So he says, learn Chassidus, and you won't be spoiled from the world. And this is definitely something, an advice that I take, and and I practice a lot more than learning a bar in the middle of the night, is to, anytime I feel that the world is a little too heavy, learn Chassidus. And this is the Podeinu Batzilinu Ba'ayim. This is the Aייzenbech who learned Chassidus and lived Chassidus, sharing us his insight on how we could also do the same. I just want to finish with my last encounter with Rabbi Aייzenbech. And that was only a few weeks before he passed away. I was actually the whole summer in the Catskills. But I come every once in a while. I come back for a few days to work. And I made sure while I was here to go on Victoria to go visit him. At that time, he was sitting, his eyes were closed. He was not interested in talking, in communicating. There was some food that his wife has sent. Didn't want to eat it. He didn't want to, wasn't communicating, his eyes were closed the whole time. There was music playing. He knew I was here, I was talking to him, he was not answering. Mr. Kreisman had left Chayenu on the table. So I said, Aייzenbech, should I read the Tanya, today's Tanya? He right away told me, Moshe, yes. I started to read the Tanya. He opened his eyes, looked at me straight throughout the whole time that I was reading the Tanya. I finished the day's Tanya, he closed his eyes. So I said, good, maybe we're onto something, Rabbi Aייzenbech. Zal ik learn the Chumash? So he pointed, yes. I started to learn to read the Chumash and Rashi. He wasn't looking at me, he didn't open his eyes. He said yes, but he wasn't opening his eyes. Tanya, but he came alive. In his mamish, like a few weeks before he passed away. This is what it means living with Chassidus is kipshuta. Chassidus brings us life. So v'achai t'neliboy, as we heard many times, in this context with me, learning Chassidus, that will give us chai. Good convention.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Dahan. I just want to say we're down to our last couple speakers. We have to share right afterward. If everyone could please stay, we have 2 minyan for Maidiv. Rabbi Dahan mentioned about my dear father. There's so many things. But V'achai and Libai, you know, there's Taka Gereis of Siddish Yidden, but their family stays behind. My father was a chassid, but he loved his family, and he did anything for his children. Sadly, my father did have that surgery after the Fabrengen. It was just about the time of my Anochas Tefillin. But I remember during the time he had just come out of the hospital, he was weak, and it was my Anochas Tefillin. He felt he didn't want me to do the regular Maimer. He wanted me to do some Meini Chesed Bechel from Be'er HaTeira. And 2 pages, he wrote down the whole Maimer for me. Where did he get the kech? He wrote down the whole Maimer. I just want to say that my father, even though he worked in the yeshiva, he worked in the previous to this seminary, he did a seminary, he had 3-4 jobs. But every Thursday night, every Leil Shishi, my father never went to sleep. He always learned the entire night, every Leil Shishi. But not only that, my father never went to sleep. That every single child of his was home, no matter if they were 4 or 40. If you were coming in, he always wanted to make sure his love and his care and his devotion is and was remarkable. With that, I'd like to call upon Rabbi Shalom Bar Cohen, a Talmud of my father's, to please share a few words.
Okay, just a short memory. 40 years ago, I came back from camp with no teachers at school, with no summer camp. And my father, Shalom, went over to Rabbi Aייzenbech and asked him to teach me. So he came up to this room and he started teaching me I still remember, it's 40 years ago. He gave his time for me to teach me about the teach me the parasha. Rashi, that was that. I want to focus a little bit on some other memories as the years went on. Hey, Tavis from Zion, we were in his class. We walked into the class with the Dan Notzach, singing the Dan Notzach. The kids, we were small kids, we were 11 years old. Then those years. Then it was in years to come. He told me once, just to show his devotion to Chassidus. He once told me that he chazer 2,500 mamora. That Chazan Barabi. And then he ran away from me. He didn't want to mention anything else. Maybe it was 5,000, I'm not sure. He once, when the Teres Chaim came out, was the new print of Teres Chaim, the Shmeis came out in the Isis Mir Boys. So he tells me, Shalom I've learned the Teres Chaim. Even though you're not, as I told him, was verstehe ich, Teres Chaim. So he said, I feel like, man steht nicht auf das Leben, ganze Sache. He wanted, he was a ligner Chassidus, he was a harder Chassidus, he was a ligner Chassidus in Ganzen. Because once by Fabregan, and someone was telling him off, so he told him, Mistam, letzte Woche habe ich gelernt Chassidus, mehr wie viel du gelernt, die ganze Leben lang. And he hadn't think it was a joke. This is a Choshev man, but he learned, he used to learn Chassidus, Bishofi. I remember many memories. I used to go to his house, the Shishi. We used to sit, like I mentioned, we used to not go to sleep at night till the morning. We sat one night, he looked at his clock and said, Alisa Shachar, Shabbat, you could go. We sat the whole night, learning Chassidus, Chassidus Sipurim, Yeshemayim, Gehorvet, and Chassidus. He was even when he wasn't able to read, he would have his book finalized. I would read in my morning. That was his life. His life was Chassidus.
Thank you. I'd like to ask my dear older brother, Rav Shimon Metzin Eisen to please honor us with a few words.
It was just last year at this time. Can't hear it. There. So it was just last year at this time, and I was driving with my son to the cemetery. Of course, we were talking. And we got naturally talking. It's a longer trip to the cemetery, and we just pointed out briefly that it was looking into the life of his grandfather, Zayden. We're not necessarily looking, we're talking about realistically, particularly in today's generation, a Hilparitcher figure. However, every year has a book, Zes Sefer Tildes Adam. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's the center part of a person's life, busier parts of a person's life, until the very end, and they knows who he or she has an impact on. So we're talking just naturally, which is a very healthy, very natural conversation about my father. For that matter, my father had an interesting head start in his life, something which is, you look at the Gemara and Midrashim, it speaks about individuals, their greatness, their piety. The Gemara says it not necessarily began at the time when they were born, or even earlier than that, their parents and so on. But for that matter, as an example, my father, he grew up in the tumultuous times of the development of the present Eretz Yisrael, as an example, with a family, an iconic family of 8, great two parents, important parent figures. They were sitting because of the wars at the beginning, the wars of independence, if you call history. It was always tumultuous, always difficult times. And as an example, parents went out, they put together some dough because they were all sitting in a miklat, and they put together some dough and they walked out just to bring a little bit of bread for the children. You could imagine in a child of 9 that he had his parents together with a difficult time, that he had his parents, and a few hours later, his mother just came back without his father. It was just a moment which, of course, metamorphosed the entire family in such a difficult manner. There's an interesting addition to that, just to understand how we never understand how the English works. Actually, when they left the home, they went to visit his parents because they said, it's on the way before the bakery, let's have a stop. It's a difficult time, so we came to his parents. And his parents rebuked him. He said, you're going out now, you have 8 children, you're walking the streets. He said, I'm just trying to prepare some bread. He said, you stay here, I'll go to the Jordanian border where there was the bakery, and we'll do it, and we'll bring back the bread, and then you'll go. Do not walk the streets. And sure enough, the moment they both left the house, they stayed inside the house, and the mom went through the window and took him out, and eventually, a few hours later, she came home herself, which was, of course, a difficult beginning, which we say Sefer Tillis Adam. It's really from the very beginning, the person's born, inception, and even before that. His parents, for that matter, his father was a very great person, the Yid, which had a lot of Yiras Shamayim. He wasn't a husband, he learned Tanya every day. He was somebody who earlier, Aaron and Belz, had only trusted with his shchita, which was again something very much telling about him. He was known in Yerushalayim. So, in starting a life like that, of course, you start already with an important head start of your important sensitive relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. From that time, as the youngest of age, turned his passion to Chabad. He knew that my grandmother, which was a descendant of the Alter Rebbe, he joined the yeshivas of Chabad. Then there was very little communication of the Rebbe and the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael, but nonetheless, the little communication with when came across, he took it with much passion and fervor, pulled all his siblings, namely his brothers, to Chabad yeshivas. He was always passionate, like Rabbi Kaplan said, for that matter. In the day of Shiva, in the days of Shiva, when he came, Rabbi Kaplan came over, the first words I told him, I repeated my kids, that he said it very briefly. He said, your father was a kanoi in Hiskashus, which is very telling. In other words, it wasn't just Stam. For that matter, interestingly, why should it begin someone's youngest of age into such little communication with the Rebbe's 70, but nonetheless, at that time, how it all turned out that he turned his passion in that direction, and that led him through, in the very beginning, again, sitting in learning in Temchat Tzmimim, bringing his siblings to Temchat Tzmimim, later teaching in Temchat Tzmimim, for that matter, with the Rebbe's guides and the Rebbe's instruction. Very much part of the passion of visiting the Rebbe at those years, which was a rarity, and so on, and then eventually settled in Mont-Real, which was his place, Alei Adamus, where basically he had his shlichus. And at the end of the day, 54 years invested in chinuch, in Altar Sakedesh, educating children in Limud Torah, and eventually the girls in the seminary, for that matter, interestingly, you think you know everything about your own father, you would believe that you know everything about your own father. The days of Shiva was very telling, interesting even in this detail about my father teaching in yeshiva. Those who know this exists with all the history. When you have a father teaching in the school, you learn. It's a bit of a roller coaster for you socially, because every small incident that happens, obviously kids come out to recess. This happened, that happened, and you have to maintain your composure and to believe that your father is doing the right thing, but not necessarily it's always easy. And those kids, which in your own mind over the years believe they were the rebel rousers, and they were the ones who really gave my father a hard time by Shiva, they sat and they said so clearly and poignantly and so honestly, and you should know that if I learned in these 8 years in yeshiva, it was mainly with your father. We never wasted a moment. And if I know how to touch a piece of Gemara, those very kids, am I going to touch a piece of Gemara because of your father? And yes, if I was rebuked and your father rebuked me, I was deserving of that 100%, because he was 100% about learning. His time was sacred, and we learned without a stop. And again, hearing that so many years later, even though peripherally knowing that about my father, but hearing that precisely those kids, which I was a bit intimidated when I came out to recess as an example. And of course, in the girls' school, so many students, myriads of students, and today, married, shlichas, even if you don't put your ears to it, you hear it, these messages crash to you. Rabbi Eissenbach's attention, his professional delivery of the messages, his pedagogy, par excellence, and so on and so forth, and so much more. These discussions, and then being part of a community, someone uncompromising from the very beginning in matters which are important to a community, his limit of siddhis, his fabrangers, and so on and so forth. Says Sefer Tillis Adam. We're not looking for somebody particularly in a high level of the Hasidim of yesteryears, but this is telling. This is significant. And this is what V'achai and Liyba is, for that matter. And there was a famous fabranger of Yechidus of the Rebbe. And the Mashpia went into the Yechidus, and the Rebbe asked him, when you fabrang with your people, your Talmidim, or with your community, forget it was Mashpia Yeshiva, Mashpia of the community, what do you talk about? So he says, of course, talk about the Nasi Adeh, talk about the Rebbe, because this is what we are. Every generation, Hashem says, sends to the world one iconic, untainted, unadulterated Kedusha, which is 100% Kodesh Kadashim. We are regular people, and this is what you do by Fabregan, to try to draw some energy, which is something which is absolute Kedusha. And the Rebbe was listening. And the Rebbe said, what about older Siddhim? Do you talk about them? Of course, periodically. And the Rebbe said to him, I agree 100% that the central part of Siddhis, of Fabregan, ought to be talking about the Rebbe. Understandably so. From there, we nourish our chayes in our Avodas Hashem. However, the Rebbe went on to tell you, and said the same token, you have to make the talking about elder Siddhim very centralistic in your Fabregans. Why so? He said, because the people who sit by the Fabregan, there's always that dissonance between the Rebbe and themselves. They know the Rebbe is Kodesh Kadashim from day one. And that's why he is the one chosen to be the Rai Mehem. And of course, he's there not as an individual, he's there to encourage us, support us in our Avodas Hashem. But at the end of the day, they look at a Rebbe as a transcendent, aloof entity, which he is, of course. When you talk about Chassidim, elder Chassidim, or Chassidim even in the past, but namely Chassidim who began in the same manner as all those attendants, you have a unique type of impact on them because they look at you, they look at the individual, and they look at themselves and they say, we started with the same level. And what did this chassid do? He just, in a very organized, structured manner, established his life with a healthy davening, healthy learning, chassidus, Avodas Hashem, he became a mitzvah, and he climbed the rungs and ladders of Avodas Hashem. And he reached this level, and the individual listens to it time and again. It registers time and again in their mind that I, which began in the same way, could be perhaps one day, if not like that individual, but a bit like that individual. And then I've encouraged him to say, and yes, we talk about it, but nonetheless, we have to emphasize that there's regular people began their life in a very regular way, yet climbed to the extent that they were truly genuine Eidei Hashem. This we can learn, and that I've told them, from a certain perspective and point of view, even more or differently, distinctively than from a Rebbe. And I say this, of course, because we gather together over here. There's so much v'chai to the libe of a sefer telis adam, of an individual which contributed so much to myriads and myriads of talmidim and talmidas, and myriads of so many people in the community, in ways that, of course, we don't even have any true hashara, because in the end of the day, it goes on and it goes on without any interruption, without any interruption. But I want to conclude with one point, one part, which was very much demonstrative in the life of my father, Olav Shalom. For that matter, based on this week's parsha, the pasuk says, quoted before, Atim Yitzavim Mayim Kulchem, the Alter Rebbe, at the very beginning of the Kotetei this week, points out the 10 levels which Hashem speaks about. And the Alter Rebbe becomes quite very fierce, and he says that in the end of the day, why does Hashem identify every one of these levels? Specifically in the pasuk it says Kol Yisrael, or Kulchem rather, then it says Kol Ish Yisrael. Why does the Torah divide and say there's the heads, and there's the water carriers, and the wood choppers, and so on? And the Alter Rebbe said that very clearly, that no one should ever think in their life for one moment they are a Rosh, they are head, and the other one is just a secondary or a lower level in their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or as a member of Klal Yisrael. And the Alter Rebbe said it very clearly, Chas v'shalom, to think that there is a phenomenon, there is a true Rosh and a true Sof. And as Alter Rebbe says, it's not despite Am Yisrael is multi-colorful and multifaceted. Nonetheless, Hashem loves them. Alter Rebbe says Hashem appreciates the fact that Am Yisrael is so multifaceted and so multicolored. And therefore, in essence, every Yid has a virtue that the other Yid doesn't have. As such, every Yid is a Rosh to another party, and every Yid, in the end of the day, complements and contributes something that someone else doesn't have. To the extent Alter Rebbe says, there's no beginning, there's no end. Everything is, at the end of the day, integrated, and this is the beauty of Am Yisrael. This is what Hashem appreciates. And I say this because, just like we find this idea on the macro picture, we find it on the micro as well. Within every single year, there's the Roshechem, Shiftechem, there's Avodas Hashem, the service to the Almighty. And then there's the regular stuff, the woodcutter, the water carrier, and so on. Which, of course, the Roshechem, Shiftechem is learning Torah, is davening, is doing a mitzvah, is doing big mitzvah behidr. That's the Roshechem, Shiftechem. And then you have the regular stuff that people do that belong to community. There's friendship, camaraderie, and so on and so forth. And usually there's a divide. You know, Shamayim, Shamayim, Hashem, Aras, Tasal, you see many people, precisely by Eidei Hashem, people who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's always this balance. There's so much into their Shechem, Shiftechem type of service when it comes to the lower, to the interaction, which they have with family, community, and so on. Not necessarily they're able to hold on, not necessarily they're able to find within that their relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Hashem. It comes out to them and says, at the end of the day, it's a one package. With my father, Al Bashalom, I could say that in this integration between the two, he was a genius, a guy in this integration of his Avodas Hashem and his interaction with community members, the places where he taught, the places where, between the formal teaching and the following formal teaching, an interaction which just, at the end of the day, thank you so much. At the end of the day, this was something that he perfected in a way that it wasn't even an issue to him at all. And I met the other day somebody from the community, not necessarily Leyb Torah, and he says to me very sincerely, he says, this community will never be the same without Rabbi Eisen. And he said it with such sincerity. And he did not come from the Roshechem, Shiftechem dimension and dynamic within Rabbi Eisen. He came from the perspective of the very simple good mornings, the smile, the joke even, the looseness which existed between Rabbi Eisen and the community. And that integration without any differentiation, in other words, not identifying one over the other, was something which was very much identifiable with my father, Al Bashalom. You could ask the people, actually, we just mentioned Rabbi Cohen, by the Shiva as well, many things I learned by the Shiva. What Rabbi Cohen was saying, the Thursday night spent by my father's home. Of course, there was the learning of a deep minor, and then there was the talk. Talk generally was very rich in history, Chabad history, as we know, very rich in Chabad history, and beyond the norm for that matter. It was just always a pleasure to sit with him. We sat with him at a certain hour, and then after a few hours, you realize that a few hours went by because it was always intriguing and interesting, and of course, Rabbi Eisenbach's prudent eyes, beautiful countenance was very capturing, and that's the way Thursday night went by. Learning Roshechem, Shiftechem, and the other dimension which exists by Yid, and namely the integration of both of them, the consolidation of both of them, brilliantly, let me say, bittul through bittul. Some people are bittul to the Rebbe, to Kuz, to Chassidus, but nonetheless, you always see it, and you always identify it, and not necessarily, it's really the real deal. Hashem wants that integration in a way that it shouldn't be pronounced, it should just be. And Rabbi Eisebach was again par excellence, particularly in this area. Shall Hashem help that we as a community should take from this Sefer Tildas Adam, V'achai in the Liba, incorporate it. Again, we don't have to think about things which are holier than thou, but here is a person which contributed tremendously in every single area to a community for over 5 decades. There's enough what to learn, and enough what to integrate in our Avodas Hashem. And the Eibush should help. Kitz Benanu Shechnofer. May he be a good better for the family, for the community, and for all the extended. We have the Hashpah and beyond.
Amen. We're going to conclude, really conclude. By 9:05, our event is over. But we're going to conclude with asking, representing the beautiful grandchildren, great-grandchildren of my dear father, Harav Mendy Simpson, Demus Yigne, my dear father, Grace Maskil, to please honor us with a few words in honor of my father. Friends, please stay around. We're going to be doing Ma'ariv right afterwards to the young.
It seems I have 2.5 minutes on the clock, so I'm just going to share some small things that I had with my Zaidi and the experiences that I had that, to me, that really shows, and that's what made my Zaidi special. So when I was a kid, he takes me by my hand and we walk down the street and he tells me, he says, Mendy, I'm going now to my father. So I'm thinking to myself, as far as I remember, he was a little kid when his father passed away, but my Zaidi says we're going. So we go to the bank, we wait online, and I'm thinking, okay, when is this going to happen? He goes to the machine, puts in his card, gets some money, and he walks in and he says, I told you it's my father. I ask him for money, and he gives me. So, my Zaidi, he always, there was a real life to him. He had, I would say it's like a mayin amiskaver. There was a very, very high energy level to my Zaidi. And it came out in every area of his life. And I remember once someone was, Lubavitch, there's a lot of, everyone has different opinions about everything. And someone once summed it up and he said, listen, at the end of the day, the side with chayis is a kedusha. How kedusha ends up, kedusha can end up in different areas, but chayis is definitely kedusha. And that's what my Zaidi had. When he passed away, I heard the news. I was in my house, and I immediately just froze, and I lied down, and I started crying, just nonstop. And I was thinking to myself, what is hurting me so much? What did he give over to me that really touched me so deep? Obviously it's my Zaidi, but when he passed away, it really touched me so deep. And I was thinking tonight how to put it together, what it was. At that point, I figured out what it was. When my Zaidi met me and he gave me Shalom Aleichem, the feeling was a total acceptance and a total joy that you are my Einikol and you are the most valuable and person ever, and you're just perfect the way you are. And a total acceptance of that. And I was thinking tonight, when I was asked a few minutes ago to talk, I was thinking, what did it come from? What did he have? And maybe, I don't know, but possibly, it says, Ezo Asher Sameach Bechalkai. My Zaidi Eizvah, if you watched him walking in the streets, he looked like he was worth at least, a couple $100 million. He had such a life, joy, and acceptance of his chelkei. Everyone has a chelkei, and everyone's busy dealing with the chelkei their whole life. My Zaidi had a certain acceptance to that chelkei, and because it was his, and because he had it, he was sameach about it. So when he met part of his chelkei, anyone part of his chelkei, and any part of anyone's chelkei is not 100% perfect, when he met you, he was completely sameach that you're part of his chelkei as an einikol, and completely satisfied about it. And a lot of other einikol, if you ask them, one-on-one, who was his favorite einikol? Most einikol will tell you it really was them. They were, because he always had something special and to make them feel special and good. So it's really something that I take from him, and it should be a bit of better for the whole family, and we should all be sameach b'chalkai. And as my Zaidi always finished off, and he always yearned and wanted, he was always fighting for something more. And he always wanted the Golam Mitzvah Shlema, Yidei Mashiach Tzidkenu, the scholars of the Rebbe, take it from me, Hamash.
Thank you very much, Mendy. You spoke so beautiful. I just want to end. We heard so much beautiful things tonight by Chai and Libe. But Mendy Simpson topped it off. Maybe she should give the whole mishpacha a good gesund. I just want to end that Mendy had said about my father. The last time I met my father was just a few weeks before his passing. He was in the home. And his mind was going in and out. He had challenges with his memory. And he was very much in pain. His mouth was pressing on a part of his body. And I said, Abba, how are you doing? He says, I'm great, Baruch Hashem. And that was not only that time, that was his entire life. As children, I never heard my father complain. Yes, you work in yeshiva, things are fantastic, or said everything's beautiful. I never heard that. That was a famous line, nicht in front for the kinder. The kids lived, it was always about thinking about the children. How are they going to see it? How are they going to hear it? How is it going to impact them in life? And it's so beautiful to see that the next generation felt that love and impact and inspiration. And I think for us, Vaychai and the Libe is, you know, that I always said in life there's opportunities and then challenges that turn out to be the best of opportunities. Taka, my father was a huge chassid. He didn't waste a minute. He was a makusha. He was an avid. But I think the most important thing as a family was his pasha, true care for every single member of the family in the most amazing way. Without his car, without a plane, he never missed a simcha of an einikol, of a child, of a ureinikol. And I think for us, as we're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, I just want to end with a famous story of Rabbi Shabtai Slavatitsky, who said he was driving home from his davening and he saw a sign on a Chabad house and it said the doctor's name, a Jewish guy, and he went inside and he said, tell the secretary, he says, tell the doctor, I'm here. The rabbi's here, and the doctor comes out in no time and he says, Wo bist du ben besitzte? Where were you till now? And he sits him down and he says, I want to tell you a story. He says, my mother had 9 children. She was not Lubavitch, but she wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe always responded to every letter. It's not like today, a fax, WhatsApp, email. And sadly, when my mother had a last child, within a few weeks, she passed. He says, I happen to be a medical student, so I went to learning at NYU. I said, let me go visit the Rebbe who my mother adored so much. So I made a meeting, I come into the Rebbe, it's the early hours in the morning, I'm having yechidus, and I come into the Rebbe and I introduce myself at Rebbe, I'm the child of so-and-so. Rebbe, I have one question. Why? Why did the Eibusher take away my mother? Her whole life was as children, it was all about us. Why? He said, Rebbe looked at me and the Rebbe says, if anyone tries to answer you this question, they're doing you wrong. Emunah is l'mayil mitam badas. But the Rebbe says, I want you to know that this is the letter that I, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, read every year before I go down to Kol Nidre. And he turned around and from the back of his desk he opens the drawer and he hands a letter to this young medical student. And this guy's telling the story to Rabbi Slavatitsky, and after he says, the letter was a letter that my mother wrote right before her passing. She's saying, dear Rebbe, the Eibusher benched me with this child and that child. Every child is so unique, every child is so special. He suddenly gets to me and my mother speaking about me. He said, I broke down. My mother ends the letter. She said, Rebbe, I'm not worried about myself. I just want my children to grow up to be proud, happy, and healthy children. As I finished the letter, and I looked up, and there's the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe is sobbing like a child. He said, Rebbe never met my mother, but to see how the Rebbe cared for another yid that will be away. So we're getting ready for the Yom HaNoreim. It's a time that we have to reflect of, yes, we're trying to get Ben Odom Lamokim, but the ultimate thing is Ben Odom Lachavere, how we treat a parent, how we treat a spouse, how we treat a sibling, how we treat a family member. And my father, to us, was the epitome of wisdom, of a chassid, and most importantly, how to truly love a family. May this evening be a bracha for his young, beautiful wife, that she should be gesund and stark, and may we all merit together that before this evening's over, we should be together with Mashiach to Kein Yerushalayim. Thank you. Rabbi Yisai Tuminyan from Ma'ariv,